When did you go to Dubai?
2000, I think fall of 2011 was my first year there.
How did that all come about?
I was teaching at a small college in northwest Pennsylvania. Neither one of us, my wife or I, really wanted to stay in western Pennsylvania. I'd started thinking about Dubai a little bit when I was working on my PhD in Boston.
What was your first impression when you got to Dubai?
Actually, the funny thing is we were really excited. I mean, I flew in the middle of the night, and then you fly down, and it was nice. I mean, we were really excited by it. And Dubai actually shows really well at night. I think it shows better at night sometimes than it does in the day because the air is really hazy. So you almost get a better cityscape, right, when it's dark and you can look at the lights of all the buildings. So it was exciting, and it was sort of exotic. And so yeah, I mean, the first impression was pretty much positive, although it was hot. Because we got there in August. I mean, it was 120 degrees.
Did you see any obvious differences teaching students in Dubai as opposed to teaching students from America?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I mean, I think the thing that was the very first thing that was most noticeable was the sort of respect for the office in Dubai. I mean, they're very, very respectful. And that was very different from Teal. Most of the professors are from the West, and so they're always very interested in our experience. They are not very curious about the subject matter. And I sort of get it. I mean, to some extent, there's a little bit of resistance to westernization, but I think those were the most noticeable things.
What was the culture like?
There's kind of several cultures in Dubai. I mean, on one hand, you have, the locals. The locals are an interesting story in themselves. I mean, they're a very small part of the population. About 15% of Dubai is actually Emirati citizens. Local culture sort of intentionally remains very traditional. However, there's also a weird mix because many of them are very, very rich. For the most part, they dress in local garb. And the kids at college were an interesting thing to watch in that regard because they sort of transitioned. They oftentimes would dress Western, right? Like we would dress. But then by the time they're adults, Emiratis would usually take the traditional kandor for men and abaya for women and dress that. So in college, you could see them transition. Then you have sort of different expat cultures. There's huge British presence in Dubai. Lots and lots and lots of people from the UK or Australia or South Africa, and they all kind of mesh. Most of them have kind of a lot of money. The British expats are famous for sort of getting themselves completely tanked at the hotel bars and so forth, which is strange because, of course, technically it's an Islamic country under Sharia law, but the government kind of looks the other way a lot. There's a number of cultures. I mean, there's kind of a traditional, there's an expat glitzy, and then there's sort of poorer culture as well that isn't seen as much.
Was there anything that surprised you?
There were a few things that were like that were irritating. Some of them dealt with like the way that medical insurance worked, and I'm trying to remember specific instances. But there was a lack of sort of transparency because appearances are trying to be kept up, and sometimes that became rather irritating because sort of the culture was that there were, and this happened at the university a lot too. So I would never admit there's a problem, but cheating was rampant, and there was no stigma to it.
Was there anything that stuck with you that's from Dubai? Were you changed in any way?
I don't know. I mean, that's tough to say. I mean, we still cook a lot of food. I mean, I suppose it was probably changed in a number of, smaller ways. I think anytime you travel, period, it goes into your sort of whole cultural makeup, and that goes double for living someplace. I massively encourage, not just traveling, but if you ever get the chance, I mean, just live abroad for a while. It's really interesting. It's actually hard coming back. None of us had a hard time really moving there. I mean, there were frustrating things, a number of them, but it was never like, oh, I can't take this. It was always, sort of interesting. The job itself was annoying, but that wasn't a product of being in Dubai. It was a corrupt university, quite honestly. But it was actually harder coming back because it's like, I don't know how to say it. It's just kind of just boring. It's like, well, this is, I'm just living in the United States again. There's nothing terribly interesting about this. One of the things I think it gave me too is I'd always been envious of people from different cultural backgrounds because I felt like, oh, I'm just an American, But when you live abroad, actually, it's sort of like, okay, well, being an American actually there's a cultural identity to that as well. Because, of course, I mean, we're quite different than either the Brits or the Canadians, and you see that really when you're living with them in the Middle East.
So if somebody wanted to visit Dubai or spend an extended amount of time there, what would you tell them by way of advice?
I mean, visiting just okay. Like I said, you could spend as much or as little as you wanted in Dubai. But if you were visiting, I mean, if the primary purpose of going to Dubai was tourism, to go on the cheap would really be a waste. I mean, you should go somewhere else, right? If you're going to visit, you should have a little bit of cash to flash, just so that you can really enjoy it properly. Living there, I think you just have to sort of manage your expectations, and then enjoy the culture, in Dubai. Enjoy the friends you make in terms of expats, take opportunities to travel. But it's really enjoyable. I mean, I think if a Christian were going there, I think that, getting involved in the church scene is really neat. I mean, it's a very, very different sort of thing. I think they said we had people from 66 different countries at our church, routinely on any given Sunday. So it's really, really multicultural and diverse. And the assumption is, okay, it's a lot of money, it's very modern, it's very ritzy, it's very repressive. It's not repressive at all. I mean, it is an Arab Islamic country, technically under Sharia law, but it's incredibly Western. You could go on vacation and actually, I don't think you would notice any restrictions at all. But sometimes people are, I think people are afraid of it because it's in the Middle East.